Welcome to another peaceful journey through the forgotten corners of history, where tonight we'll explore the strange and surprisingly effective superstitions that guided medieval life in ways that might actually make you reconsider what we call progress. Whether you're settling in for the evening or simply seeking a moment of calm reflection, I'm grateful you've chosen to spend this time wandering through the peculiar wisdom of our ancestors, who somehow managed to stumble upon truths we're only now beginning to understand. Picture yourself standing in the cobblestone streets of 13th century London, where the air hangs thick with wood smoke and the distant sound of church bells marking the hours. The narrow alleys twist between timber-framed houses that lean so close together their upper stories nearly touch, creating shadowy passages where mysterious remedies and ancient rituals flourish in ways that would seem utterly bizarre to our modern sensibilities. Yet hidden within these seemingly irrational practices lies a collection of superstitions that actually worked, though the people who followed them had no idea why. Tonight, we'll discover how medieval beliefs about everything from healing herbs to protective charms contained kernels of genuine scientific truth, wrapped in layers of folklore and spiritual tradition that made them all the more powerful. We'll explore the fascinating intersection where faith meets medicine, where ancient wisdom accidentally stumbled upon principles that modern researchers are only now validating in their laboratories and clinical studies. The medieval mind operated on principles that seem foreign to our evidence-based world, yet these supposedly primitive people developed practices that genuinely improved their lives in measurable ways. They created systems of belief that provided both psychological comfort and tangible benefits, weaving together observation, tradition, and spiritual conviction into approaches that modern science is finally beginning to appreciate and understand. Our first stop on this gentle exploration takes us to the monastery gardens of medieval Europe, where monks cultivated not only vegetables for their evening meals, but also maintained extensive collections of medicinal herbs that formed the backbone of medieval healthcare. These religious communities developed elaborate rituals around the planting, harvesting, and preparation of healing plants that seemed steeped in pure superstition, yet produced remarkably effective remedies for common ailments and serious diseases. Brother Augustine rises before dawn in his stone cell at the Abbey of St. Denis, his sandaled feet padding silently across cold floors as he makes his way to the herb garden that has become his life's devotion. The morning mist clings to rows of carefully tended plants, whose Latin names he recites like prayers, understanding that each species requires not only proper soil and sunlight, but also the correct spiritual preparations to unlock their healing potential. The medieval belief in the doctrine of signatures suggested that God had marked every plant with visual clues about its medicinal properties, creating a divine pharmacy where yellow flowers treated liver ailments, while red berries addressed blood disorders. This seemingly primitive classification system led monks to discover genuine therapeutic relationships between plant compounds and human physiology that modern pharmacology has validated centuries later through sophisticated chemical analysis. Brother Augustine carefully harvests willow bark during the new moon, following traditions that demanded specific timing and ritual preparation for maximum potency. His ancestors believed that lunar cycles influenced the concentration of healing spirits within medicinal plants, requiring precise timing to capture their full therapeutic power. Modern research has revealed that many plants do indeed produce varying concentrations of active compounds based on circadian rhythms and seasonal cycles, making the medieval timing practices surprisingly accurate despite their mystical explanations. The monk grinds his willow bark using a mortar blessed by the abbey's oldest priest, mixing the powder with holy water while reciting specific Latin incantations believed to enhance the medicine's effectiveness. This elaborate ritual seemed like pure superstition to later generations, who dismissed such practices as ignorant folklore. Yet the willow bark contains salicin compounds that modern medicine recognizes as the precursor to aspirin, one of our most widely used pain relievers and anti-inflammatory medications. Medieval herbalists developed complex preparation methods that combined spiritual ritual with practical techniques for extracting and preserving active compounds from medicinal plants. They believed that prayers and blessings infused their remedies with divine power, while specific grinding, soaking, and fermentation processes were thought to appease plant spirits and unlock hidden therapeutic properties. Modern analysis reveals that many of these seemingly magical preparation methods actually optimize the extraction and bioavailability of active pharmaceutical compounds. The monastery's healing practices extended beyond simple herbal remedies to encompass elaborate ceremonies that combined physical treatment with psychological support in ways that anticipated modern understanding of the placebo effect and the importance of patient expectations in therapeutic outcomes. Brother Augustine would spend hours with each patient, listening to their concerns, while preparing personalized remedies that addressed not only physical symptoms, but also spiritual and emotional needs that medieval medicine recognized as inseparable from bodily health. Medieval physicians understood that healing required more than correct diagnosis and appropriate medication, demanding attention to the patient's mental state, social relationships, and spiritual condition in ways that modern medicine is only beginning to rediscover through research on psychoneuroimmunology and the mind-body connection. They created treatment rituals that provided comfort, hope, and social support, while delivering genuine therapeutic interventions disguised as supernatural practices. The abbey's reputation for miraculous healing attracted pilgrims from across Europe, who sought relief from ailments that conventional medicine could not address through the crude surgical techniques and limited pharmaceutical knowledge available during the medieval period. These desperate travelers often experienced genuine improvement through combinations of effective herbal medicine, supportive community care, and powerful psychological interventions that medieval practitioners delivered through religious frameworks their patients could understand and accept. Brother Augustine's morning routine includes careful observation of each patient's complexion, breathing patterns, and energy levels as he makes his rounds through the abbey's modest infirmary. Medieval medical theory demanded attention to subtle changes in appearance and behavior that might indicate shifting balances between the four bodily humours that were thought to determine health and disease. While the humoral theory itself was scientifically incorrect, this systematic approach to patient monitoring led to early detection of complications and changes in condition that improved treatment outcomes. The medieval emphasis on individualized treatment plans based on each patient's unique constitution and circumstances anticipated modern personalized medicine approaches that consider genetic variations, lifestyle factors, and environmental influences in developing therapeutic strategies. Medieval physicians spent considerable time learning about their patients' daily habits, family histories, and social situations to create comprehensive treatment approaches that addressed underlying causes, rather than simply managing symptoms. Medieval superstitions about food and nutrition contained surprising wisdom about dietary practices that promoted health and prevented disease through mechanisms that medieval people could not understand, but somehow managed to implement effectively. The elaborate religious rules governing medieval eating habits included timing restrictions, food combinations, and preparation methods that accidentally optimized nutrition while reducing exposure to foodborne illnesses and contamination. The practice of fasting during specific seasons and religious observances provided regular periods of caloric restriction that modern research associates with improved metabolic health, increased longevity, and enhanced immune function. Medieval people believed these fasting periods purified their souls and prepared them for spiritual enlightenment, never suspecting that their religious practices were triggering beneficial biological processes that science is only now beginning to understand and appreciate. Medieval cooks developed elaborate spice combinations based on beliefs about balancing hot and cold properties in different foods, creating flavor profiles that happen to combine ingredients with complementary nutritional profiles and natural preservative properties. These seemingly arbitrary seasoning traditions help prevent food spoilage while enhancing the bioavailability of essential nutrients through chemical interactions that medieval cooks attributed to magical properties rather than biochemical processes. The medieval practice of eating certain foods during specific seasons was guided by beliefs about maintaining harmony between human physiology and natural cycles, leading to dietary patterns that aligned with optimal availability of fresh nutrients while avoiding foods during periods when spoilage and contamination risks were highest. Medieval people consumed warming foods during cold months and cooling foods during hot seasons based on humoral theory that accidentally created eating patterns that supported seasonal immune needs and metabolic adaptations. Medieval households maintained elaborate food storage rituals that combined practical preservation techniques with spiritual practices believed to protect provisions from evil spirits and harmful influences. These seemingly superstitious storage methods actually created optimal conditions for preventing spoilage, while maintaining nutritional quality through controlled temperature, humidity, and exposure to light that medieval people attributed to supernatural protection rather than environmental science. The practice of blessing meals and saying prayers before eating created mindful eating habits that promoted better digestion while fostering social connections that modern research associates with improved mental health and enhanced immune function. Medieval families gathered for communal meals that combined nutritional sustenance with social bonding and spiritual reflection in ways that supported both physical and psychological well-being through mechanisms their practitioners never consciously understood. Medieval sleeping practices were governed by elaborate superstitions about optimal timing, positioning, and environmental conditions that accidentally created sleep hygiene habits that modern research confirms as beneficial for restorative sleep and overall health. These practices were justified through beliefs about protecting sleepers from nocturnal demons and malevolent spirits, rather than optimizing circadian rhythms and sleep quality. Medieval households arranged their sleeping quarters according to ancient traditions that positioned beds away from drafty windows and cold stone walls while ensuring proper ventilation that prevented the accumulation of stale air and harmful vapors. These seemingly arbitrary placement rules were justified through beliefs about protecting sleepers from night-wandering spirits and evil influences, yet they accidentally created sleeping environments that maintained optimal temperature and air quality for deep, restorative sleep. The practice of retiring to bed shortly after sunset and rising with dawn was guided by religious obligations and spiritual beliefs about aligning human activities with divine rhythms established at creation. Medieval people believed that sleeping during certain hours exposed them to demonic influences, while early rising demonstrated proper devotion to God and preparation for daily prayers. Modern chronobiology research reveals that these sleep schedules aligned perfectly with natural circadian rhythms, optimizing melatonin production and supporting healthy sleep-wake cycles that enhanced both physical recovery and mental clarity. Medieval bedchambers incorporated elaborate rituals involving blessed herbs, protective amulets, and specific prayers recited before sleep to ward off nightmares and evil spirits that were thought to attack vulnerable sleepers during unconscious hours. Lavender, chamomile, and other aromatic plants were scattered beneath mattresses and hung from bed frames based on beliefs about their spiritual protective properties, never suspecting that these herbs contained natural compounds that promoted relaxation and improved sleep quality through measurable physiological effects. The medieval practice of sharing beds with family members or trusted companions was driven by practical concerns about warmth and security, as well as spiritual beliefs about mutual protection against nocturnal threats. This sleeping arrangement provided psychological comfort and physical warmth while creating social bonds that supported emotional well-being and stress reduction. Modern research on co-sleeping demonstrates both benefits and risks of shared sleeping arrangements, validating some aspects of medieval practices while revealing potential drawbacks their practitioners never considered. Medieval communities developed elaborate seasonal sleeping rituals that adjusted bedtime routines, sleeping positions, and bedroom environments based on changing weather conditions and celestial influences that were believed to affect human health and spiritual vulnerability. Summer sleeping practices emphasize cooling strategies and protection from increased demonic activity during longer nights, while winter arrangements focused on warmth retention and defense against spirits that were thought to gain power during cold, dark months. The practice of changing sleeping positions and bed orientations according to lunar phases and seasonal transitions was guided by astrological beliefs about planetary influences on human physiology and spiritual condition. Medieval sleepers adjusted their head positions to align with specific compass directions during different times of year, following traditions that accidentally optimized sleep quality by considering factors like natural light exposure, air circulation, and electromagnetic influences that affect circadian rhythm regulation. Medieval pregnancy and childbirth practices were surrounded by elaborate superstitions that combined practical medical knowledge with spiritual beliefs about protecting mothers and infants from supernatural threats during the vulnerable period of birth and early infancy. These traditions included specific dietary restrictions, behavioral guidelines, and protective rituals that seemed rooted in pure superstition, yet often provided genuine medical benefits through mechanisms their practitioners could not possibly understand. Pregnant women followed detailed guidelines about foods to avoid, activities to restrict, and spiritual practices to maintain during pregnancy, based on beliefs about protecting the developing child from evil influences and ensuring proper formation of both body and soul. Many of these restrictions accidentally eliminated foods and behaviors that modern medicine recognizes as potentially harmful during pregnancy, while encouraging practices that supported maternal health and fetal development through nutritional and lifestyle modifications. The medieval custom of surrounding laboring women with female relatives and experienced midwives created supportive birth environments that reduced stress and provided practical assistance during delivery. These gatherings were justified through beliefs about protecting mother and child from demonic interference during the spiritually dangerous moment of birth, yet they provided emotional support and skilled assistance that improved outcomes for both mothers and infants through reduced complications and enhanced recovery. Medieval midwives developed elaborate preparation rituals involving blessed oils, protective herbs, and specific prayers that were believed to ease labor pains and ensure safe delivery through divine intervention. Many of these practices incorporated genuine medical knowledge disguised as spiritual tradition, including massage techniques that improved circulation, herbal remedies that supported uterine function, and positioning strategies that facilitated easier delivery while reducing risk of complications. The practice of immediately baptizing newborn infants was driven by urgent spiritual concerns about protecting unbaptized souls from eternal damnation. Yet this tradition ensured that trained religious officials examined each newborn for signs of distress or abnormality that required immediate attention. Medieval baptismal ceremonies provided opportunities for early health assessments that could identify problems requiring intervention while creating community support networks for new families. Medieval child-rearing practices incorporated numerous superstitions about protecting infants from evil spirits, harmful influences, and supernatural threats that required constant vigilance and specific protective measures. These beliefs led to practices that accidentally provided excellent infant care through attentive monitoring, protective clothing, and environmental controls that supported healthy development while reducing exposure to genuine dangers. The tradition of swaddling infants in blessed cloth while reciting protective prayers was believed to prevent evil spirits from stealing or harming newborn babies. Yet this practice provided physical comfort and security that promoted better sleep patterns and reduced stress responses in developing nervous systems. Medieval swaddling techniques incorporated principles that modern pediatric research validates as beneficial for infant neurological development and emotional regulation. Medieval communities maintained elaborate naming ceremonies and protective rituals for children that were designed to establish spiritual identity while warding off supernatural threats that were thought to target unnamed or unprotected infants. These traditions ensured that children received immediate community recognition and support, while creating social bonds that provided ongoing care and protection throughout childhood development. The practice of hanging protective amulets and blessed objects in children's sleeping areas was motivated by fears of nocturnal demons and evil spirits that supposedly preyed on innocent souls. Yet these traditions created visually rich environments that stimulated cognitive development while providing psychological comfort that reduced anxiety and promoted secure attachment relationships between children and caregivers. Medieval educational practices for children combined practical skill development with spiritual instruction that was believed necessary for protecting young souls from corruption and preparing them for productive adult roles in Christian society. These educational approaches accidentally incorporated principles that modern child development research recognizes as beneficial for cognitive growth, social development, and emotional maturity through structured learning experiences that balanced intellectual challenge with emotional support. The medieval practice of apprenticing children to skilled craftsmen provided practical education while removing them from parental households during adolescence, based on beliefs about the spiritual dangers of excessive family attachment and the need for young people to develop independence under proper guidance. Modern research on adolescent development validates aspects of this approach, recognizing the benefits of mentorship relationships and graduated independence that support healthy transition to adulthood. Medieval marriage customs were governed by elaborate superstitions about ensuring compatibility, fertility, and spiritual harmony between couples while protecting them from supernatural threats that were believed to target new marriages. These traditions incorporated practical wisdom about relationship formation, family planning, and social support that contributed to marriage stability and family success through mechanisms their practitioners attributed to divine blessing rather than psychological and social factors. The practice of conducting elaborate courtship rituals under parental supervision was justified through beliefs about protecting young people from demonic temptation and ensuring spiritually appropriate mate selection. Yet these extended courtship periods provided opportunities for couples to assess compatibility while building emotional bonds gradually under supportive family guidance. Medieval courtship traditions incorporated waiting periods and formal negotiations that modern relationship research associates with more stable marriages and reduced divorce rates. Medieval wedding ceremonies included numerous protective rituals involving blessed rings, sacred herbs, and specific vows that were believed to create spiritual barriers against evil influences that might threaten marital harmony. The exchange of rings during religious ceremonies was thought to create mystical bonds that protected couples from supernatural interference, never suspecting that these symbolic gestures actually strengthened psychological commitment and social recognition that supported relationship stability through measurable behavioral changes. The tradition of throwing rice, flower petals, or grain at newly married couples was intended to drive away evil spirits while ensuring fertility and prosperity through sympathetic magic that connected agricultural abundance with human reproduction. Modern research reveals that public celebration rituals strengthen community support for new marriages, while creating positive associations that enhance couple bonding and relationship satisfaction through shared positive experiences and social validation. Medieval households maintained elaborate anniversary observances and seasonal marriage renewal ceremonies that were designed to refresh spiritual protections and strengthen divine blessings on marital unions. These regular renewal practices provided opportunities for couples to recommit to their relationships while addressing problems before they escalated into serious conflicts, anticipating modern marriage therapy approaches that emphasize regular relationship maintenance and conscious commitment renewal. The medieval belief in the evil eye and its prevention through protective gestures, amulets, and counterspells was rooted in fears about jealousy and malevolent intentions causing genuine harm through supernatural means. While the mechanism was completely misunderstood, these practices actually addressed real psychological and social dynamics involving envy, competition, and negative social attention that could indeed harm individuals through stress, social isolation, and reduced community support. Medieval communities developed elaborate protocols for protecting successful individuals from evil eye attacks through specific behaviors, protective objects, and ritual cleansing that were believed to neutralize supernatural threats from envious neighbors. These practices encouraged successful people to remain modest and generous while maintaining strong community relationships, accidentally creating social behaviors that reduce conflict and maintained group cohesion through mechanisms that had nothing to do with supernatural protection. The practice of wearing protective amulets and reciting specific prayers when receiving compliments or experiencing good fortune was intended to prevent evil eye curses from taking effect through divine intervention. These habits taught people to remain humble and cautious during successful periods while maintaining spiritual perspective that prevented overconfidence and reckless behavior that might actually lead to reversals of fortune through poor decision-making rather than supernatural interference. Medieval craftsmen developed elaborate workshop rituals involving blessed tools, protective prayers, and specific timing that were believed necessary for creating high-quality products while protecting against supernatural sabotage from competitors or malevolent spirits. These seemingly superstitious practices actually incorporated quality control measures, careful timing, and focused attention that improved craftsmanship through genuine skill development disguised as spiritual protection. The tradition of blessing tools and workshop spaces at regular intervals was intended to maintain divine favor and prevent demonic interference with craft production. Yet these ceremonies provided opportunities for equipment inspection and maintenance that prevented accidents while ensuring optimal working conditions. Medieval craftsmen attributed their success to spiritual factors rather than recognizing the practical benefits of systematic tool care and workspace organization. Medieval guilds maintained elaborate initiation ceremonies and ongoing ritual obligations that were designed to ensure spiritual purity and divine protection for trade organizations. Yet these practices actually created strong professional networks, quality standards, and mutual support systems that enhanced business success through genuine economic mechanisms rather than supernatural intervention. The practice of conducting business transactions during specific lunar phases and astrological conditions was motivated by beliefs about cosmic influences on commercial success. Yet these timing restrictions often aligned with practical considerations like market cycles, seasonal demand, and optimal travel conditions that genuinely affected business outcomes through earthly rather than celestial mechanisms. Medieval merchants developed elaborate blessing rituals for new ventures and protective ceremonies for dangerous journeys that were intended to ensure divine favor and supernatural protection against bandits, storms, and commercial failure. These religious practices provided psychological confidence and community support that enabled merchants to take calculated risks while maintaining careful planning and preparation that improved their chances of success through practical rather than mystical means. The tradition of maintaining detailed records of business transactions in blessed ledgers, protected by specific prayers and protective symbols, was motivated by fears of supernatural interference with commercial records. Yet these meticulous record-keeping practices provided accurate financial information that enabled better business decisions while protecting against fraud and disputes through documented evidence rather than divine protection. Medieval agricultural practices were governed by elaborate seasonal rituals and protective ceremonies that were believed necessary for ensuring good harvests while defending crops from supernatural threats, including weather demons, crop-destroying spirits, and evil eye curses from envious neighbors. These farming traditions incorporated genuine agricultural wisdom disguised as spiritual practice, creating effective cultivation methods through mechanisms their practitioners never consciously understood. The practice of blessing fields and crops during specific religious observances was intended to invoke divine protection against supernatural threats to agricultural productivity. Yet these ceremonies typically occurred at optimal times for planting, cultivation, and harvest activities, based on centuries of accumulated observation about weather patterns and growing cycles that medieval farmers attributed to spiritual rather than natural factors. Medieval farmers developed elaborate companion planting traditions based on beliefs about plant spirits that either supported or conflicted with each other. leading to agricultural combinations that modern science recognizes as beneficial through genuine biological mechanisms, including pest control, soil enhancement, and nutrient cycling that had nothing to do with supernatural plant relationships. The tradition of storing seeds in blessed containers protected by specific prayers and amulets was motivated by fears of supernatural contamination that could ruin future crops. Yet these storage practices created optimal conditions for maintaining seed viability through controlled temperature, moisture, and pest protection that preserved genetic integrity through practical rather than mystical preservation methods. Medieval communities maintained elaborate weather prediction rituals involving animal behavior, observation, celestial sign interpretation, and spiritual divination that were believed to reveal divine intentions regarding future atmospheric conditions. While the supernatural explanations were completely incorrect, these observation practices actually incorporated genuine meteorological indicators, including atmospheric pressure changes, animal behavioral responses, and environmental patterns that provided useful forecasting information through natural rather than spiritual mechanisms. The practice of conducting rainmaking ceremonies during drought periods combined specific prayers, ritual actions, and community gatherings that were intended to persuade divine powers to provide necessary precipitation for crop survival. These ceremonies typically occurred when meteorological conditions were actually favorable for precipitation, while the community gathering and shared activities reduced social stress and maintained morale during difficult periods that required collective cooperation for survival. Medieval healing practices extended beyond herbal medicine to include elaborate therapeutic rituals involving music, dance, and communal activities that were believed to drive out disease demons and restore spiritual harmony necessary for physical health. Modern research reveals that these practices actually provided genuine therapeutic benefits through stress reduction, immune system support, and social connection that promoted healing through measurable physiological mechanisms rather than supernatural intervention. The tradition of conducting healing ceremonies in sacred spaces surrounded by supportive community members was intended to create optimal conditions for divine healing miracles, yet these practices provided optimal environments for recovery through reduced stress, enhanced immune function, and strong social support that modern medicine recognizes as crucial factors in therapeutic outcomes and patient recovery rates. Medieval communities developed elaborate quarantine practices during epidemic periods that combined practical isolation measures with spiritual purification rituals designed to protect healthy individuals from supernatural disease transmission through demonic contamination. These isolation protocols actually prevented genuine disease transmission through mechanisms that medieval people attributed to spiritual protection, rather than understanding the biological nature of infectious disease transmission. The practice of wearing protective amulets and reciting specific prayers during epidemic periods was believed to provide supernatural immunity against disease demons. Yet these traditions often encouraged behaviors that genuinely reduced infection risk, including avoiding crowded areas, maintaining personal hygiene, and seeking early treatment for symptoms through practical measures disguised as spiritual protection. Medieval funeral practices incorporated elaborate rituals for protecting the souls of the deceased, while defending the living community from supernatural threats posed by improperly handled death and burial procedures. These traditions created systematic approaches to death management that actually provided genuine psychological support for grieving families, while preventing disease transmission and maintaining social stability through practical measures justified by spiritual beliefs. The tradition of immediate body preparation and rapid burial during certain seasons was motivated by beliefs about preventing demonic possession of corpses and protecting the deceased soul's journey to the afterlife. Yet these practices actually prevented disease transmission and maintained public health through sanitation measures that medieval people attributed to spiritual necessity rather than understanding bacterial decomposition and infectious disease risks. Medieval communities maintained elaborate memorial rituals and ongoing ceremonies for honoring the dead that were intended to ensure proper spiritual rest while maintaining protective relationships between living and deceased community members. These practices provided genuine psychological benefits for grieving individuals while maintaining social continuity and cultural memory through mechanisms that supported mental health and community cohesion rather than supernatural communication. The practice of maintaining detailed genealogical records protected by blessing ceremonies and spiritual guardianship was motivated by beliefs about honoring ancestral spirits and maintaining proper relationships with deceased family members. Yet these record-keeping traditions preserved valuable genetic and medical information that helped families understand inherited health risks and make informed decisions about marriage and reproduction through practical rather than spiritual benefits. As we drift deeper into the gentle embrace of medieval wisdom, we discover that our ancestors possessed an intuitive understanding of human nature and natural processes that they expressed through the only language available to them, the vocabulary of spirits and divine intervention that made sense within their worldview, while accidentally creating practices that genuinely improved their lives in ways that modern science is only beginning to fully appreciate and understand. These medieval superstitions worked not because supernatural forces truly governed daily life, but because careful observation over generations had identified genuine patterns and relationships that provided real benefits when properly applied, even though the explanations for their effectiveness remained wrapped in spiritual tradition and religious belief that gave meaning and motivation to practices that might otherwise have seemed arbitrary or unnecessarily complicated. The medieval world created a comprehensive system of living that addressed human needs through integrated approaches combining physical, psychological, social, and spiritual elements in ways that modern specialization often struggles to achieve, demonstrating that wisdom can emerge from unexpected sources when communities remain open to learning from experience, regardless of whether they understand the underlying mechanisms that make their practices effective. Tonight, we have witnessed how seemingly primitive beliefs contained sophisticated insights about health, relationships, community life, and environmental harmony that emerged through centuries of careful observation and practical experimentation disguised as spiritual tradition, revealing that progress does not always move in straight lines, and that ancient wisdom sometimes anticipates scientific discoveries by hundreds of years, through patient attention to what actually works rather than what theories suggest should work. The monastery bells drift across the medieval countryside as we turn our attention to the remarkable healing practices that emerged from what we might call medieval medical superstition, yet contained within their ritual complexity lay genuine therapeutic wisdom that modern medicine has taken centuries to rediscover through clinical research and scientific validation. Medieval healers developed intricate diagnostic methods based on examining patients during specific lunar phases and astrological conditions, believing that celestial influences revealed hidden aspects of disease and determined optimal timing for therapeutic interventions. While their explanations involved planetary alignments and cosmic energies, these practices actually created systematic observation protocols that encouraged careful attention to subtle changes in patient condition over extended time periods, leading to more accurate diagnosis through pattern recognition that had nothing to do with astrology. The practice of examining urine color, clarity, and odor during dawn hours was justified through beliefs about capturing the soul's nightly purification process. Yet this timing coincided with optimal concentration levels for detecting metabolic abnormalities and kidney function markers that modern laboratory medicine recognizes as valuable diagnostic indicators. Medieval physicians attributed their diagnostic insights to spiritual revelation rather than understanding the biochemical processes that made their observations medically relevant. Medieval healers maintained elaborate patient preparation rituals involving fasting, prayer, and spiritual cleansing that were believed necessary for removing demonic obstacles to divine healing. Yet these practices actually optimized conditions for therapeutic intervention through stress reduction, immune system support, and elimination of dietary factors that might interfere with treatment effectiveness. The spiritual framework provided patient motivation and compliance with therapeutic protocols that might otherwise seem unnecessarily restrictive or uncomfortable. The tradition of conducting healing ceremonies in groups where multiple patients received treatment simultaneously was intended to amplify divine healing power through collective prayer and shared spiritual energy. Yet these community healing gatherings actually provided social support, reduced individual anxiety, and created positive expectations that enhanced therapeutic outcomes through measurable psychological and physiological mechanisms that medieval practitioners attributed to supernatural intervention. Medieval surgical practices were surrounded by elaborate purification rituals and protective ceremonies designed to prevent demonic interference with delicate procedures while ensuring divine guidance for surgical success. These seemingly superstitious preparations actually incorporated genuine sterile technique principles, including hand washing, instrument cleaning, and workspace purification that reduced infection rates through practical hygiene measures disguised as spiritual protection against evil influences. The practice of heating surgical instruments in blessed fires while reciting specific prayers was believed to purify them of evil contamination and invoke divine blessing for successful procedures. Yet this heating process actually sterilized instruments through high-temperature bacterial destruction that prevented post-surgical infections through mechanisms that medieval surgeons attributed to spiritual rather than biological factors. Medieval operating procedures required the presence of religious officials who maintained continuous prayer and spiritual oversight throughout surgical interventions, believing that divine attention was necessary to prevent demonic sabotage of healing efforts. These religious observers actually provided additional pairs of trained eyes that could monitor patient condition, assist with procedures, and identify complications early, improving surgical outcomes through practical assistance justified by spiritual necessity. The tradition of applying blessed oils and sacred ointments to surgical wounds was motivated by beliefs about divine healing properties that could accelerate recovery while protecting against supernatural infection. Yet many of these preparations contain genuine antimicrobial compounds derived from herbs and natural substances that promoted healing through pharmacological activity rather than mystical intervention. Medieval dental practices incorporated elaborate ritual preparations involving specific prayers and blessed instruments that were believed necessary for safely entering the spiritually sensitive mouth cavity, where demons might hide and cause ongoing pain or infection. These ceremonial preparations actually encouraged careful examination and systematic approach to dental problems that improved treatment outcomes through thorough assessment and proper technique rather than supernatural protection. The practice of extracting teeth only during certain lunar phases was justified through beliefs about cosmic influences on bleeding and healing. Yet this timing often coincided with optimal conditions for surgical procedures based on atmospheric pressure changes and patient circadian rhythms that affected blood clotting and recovery rates through physiological mechanisms that medieval dentists attributed to astrological forces. Medieval eye treatments involved elaborate vision restoration ceremonies that combined herbal preparations with specific prayers and symbolic actions designed to drive out demons of blindness while invoking divine sight restoration. These comprehensive treatment approaches actually addressed multiple factors contributing to vision problems, including nutritional deficiencies, environmental irritants, and psychological stress that affected visual function through biological rather than supernatural pathways. The tradition of treating eye conditions with preparations made from specific flowers and herbs that resembled eyes in appearance was based on the doctrine of signatures, which suggested that God marked healing plants with visual clues about their therapeutic properties. While the theological explanation was incorrect, this classification system led to the discovery of genuine anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial compounds that effectively treated various eye infections and conditions through pharmaceutical activity rather than divine intervention. Medieval mental health practices recognized the connection between spiritual condition and psychological well-being, developing treatment approaches that combined religious counseling with practical lifestyle modifications designed to restore mental balance and emotional stability through comprehensive care that address both spiritual and physical aspects of mental distress. The The practice of treating melancholia and madness through pilgrimage journeys to sacred sites was believed to provide divine healing through exposure to holy relics and sacred environments. Yet these therapeutic travels actually provided beneficial exercise, social interaction, change of environment, and sense of purpose that modern psychiatry recognizes as effective interventions for depression and anxiety disorders through mechanisms unrelated to supernatural healing. Medieval communities developed elaborate rituals for supporting individuals experiencing what we would now recognize as mental illness, creating structured environments that provided safety, routine, and compassionate care while maintaining the person's dignity and social connections through community-based treatment approaches that anticipated modern understanding of mental health recovery and social support systems. The tradition of using music, chanting, and rhythmic activities in treating mental distress was justified through beliefs about harmonizing the soul and driving out demons that caused psychological suffering. Yet these therapeutic activities actually provided genuine benefits through stress reduction, emotional expression, and neurological stimulation that promoted mental health through measurable brain chemistry changes rather than spiritual intervention. Medieval approaches to addiction and compulsive behaviors incorporated spiritual frameworks that emphasized moral purification and divine assistance in overcoming sinful desires. Yet these treatment programs actually included practical elements that modern addiction medicine recognizes as effective, including social support, behavioral modification, lifestyle changes, and ongoing accountability that addressed addiction through psychological and social mechanisms rather than purely spiritual intervention. The practice of treating alcoholism through elaborate purification ceremonies and ongoing spiritual supervision was intended to cleanse the soul of demonic possession that caused uncontrollable drinking. Yet these programs provided structured environments, peer support, and alternative activities that address the underlying psychological and social factors contributing to addictive behaviors through therapeutic community approaches that anticipated modern recovery program principles. Medieval understanding of women's health incorporated elaborate beliefs about lunar cycles, humoral balance, and spiritual influences that guided treatment approaches for reproductive health issues, pregnancy complications, and hormonal disorders through comprehensive care that addressed both physical symptoms and emotional well-being in ways that modern women's health is rediscovering through integrative medicine approaches. The tradition of timing medical treatments for women according to lunar phases and menstrual cycles was based on beliefs about cosmic influences on feminine physiology. Yet this attention to cyclical patterns actually optimized treatment effectiveness by aligning interventions with natural hormonal fluctuations that affect drug metabolism, pain sensitivity, and healing responses through biological mechanisms that medieval practitioners attributed to astrological forces. Medieval midwifery practices incorporated extensive herbal knowledge, combined with spiritual protection rituals that were believed necessary for ensuring safe delivery and healthy infants through divine blessing and supernatural protection against dangers that threatened mothers and babies during the vulnerable period of childbirth and early infancy. The practice of using specific herbs and preparations during labor was justified through beliefs about invoking divine assistance and spiritual protection. Yet many of these traditional remedies contained genuine pharmacological compounds that effectively managed pain, supported uterine function, and prevented complications through biological activity that medieval midwives attributed to supernatural rather than chemical properties. Medieval communities maintained elaborate postpartum care traditions that combined practical support with spiritual protection rituals designed to ensure proper recovery, while defending new mothers from supernatural threats that were believed to target women during the vulnerable period following childbirth. These comprehensive care approaches actually provided optimal conditions for physical and emotional recovery through rest, nutrition, social support, and stress reduction that promoted healing through natural rather than mystical mechanisms. The tradition of maintaining extended isolation periods for new mothers was motivated by beliefs about spiritual purification and protection from evil influences. Yet these recovery periods actually provided essential rest and bonding time that modern obstetrics recognizes as crucial for physical healing, breastfeeding establishment, and maternal mental health through biological processes rather than supernatural protection. Medieval elderly care practices incorporated beliefs about honoring ancestral wisdom while protecting aging community members from supernatural threats that were thought to target vulnerable elderly individuals through spiritual frameworks that actually provided comprehensive support, addressing both practical needs and emotional well-being through community-based care that anticipated modern geriatric care principles. The practice of consulting elderly individuals for important decisions and maintaining their active participation in community life was justified through beliefs about their proximity to the spirit world and accumulated spiritual wisdom. Yet this social integration actually provided cognitive stimulation, sense of purpose, and emotional support that modern gerontology recognizes as essential for healthy aging and mental well-being through social rather than supernatural mechanisms. Medieval approaches to end-of-life care combined spiritual preparation with practical comfort measures that were designed to ensure proper soul transition while providing physical and emotional support during the dying process through comprehensive care that addressed both spiritual concerns and bodily needs in ways that anticipated modern hospice care principles. The tradition of surrounding dying individuals with family members, religious officials, and community supporters was intended to provide spiritual protection and ensure proper soul departure. Yet these deathbed gatherings actually provided crucial emotional support, dignity, and comfort that modern palliative care recognizes as essential for peaceful death and family healing through psychological rather than supernatural mechanisms. Medieval seasonal health practices incorporated elaborate dietary changes, lifestyle modifications, and protective rituals that were believed necessary for maintaining bodily harmony with natural cycles while protecting against seasonal demons and atmospheric influences that threatened human health during climatic transitions. The practice of adjusting food consumption, sleep patterns, and daily activities according to seasonal changes was justified through beliefs about maintaining harmony with cosmic forces and preventing supernatural illness. Yet these lifestyle modifications actually supported optimal health through alignment with natural circadian rhythms, seasonal vitamin production, and metabolic adaptations that promoted well-being through biological rather than mystical mechanisms. Medieval communities developed elaborate seasonal purification ceremonies that combined physical cleansing with spiritual renewal activities designed to prepare individuals and communities for changing environmental conditions while removing accumulated spiritual contamination from previous seasons. These comprehensive preparation rituals actually provided genuine health benefits through improved hygiene, dietary optimization, and stress reduction that supported immune function and disease prevention through practical rather than supernatural means. The tradition of conducting community-wide health assessments during seasonal transitions was motivated by beliefs about identifying individuals who might be vulnerable to seasonal demons and atmospheric influences. Yet these systematic examinations actually provided early detection of health problems and preventive care that improved community health outcomes through medical rather than spiritual intervention. Medieval travel practices were governed by elaborate protective rituals and timing restrictions that were believed necessary for safe passage through territories inhabited by demons, bandits, and supernatural threats that endangered travelers who ventured beyond the protection of their home communities without proper spiritual preparation and divine blessing. The practice of consulting astrological charts and conducting divination ceremonies before undertaking journeys was intended to identify optimal timing and avoid periods when supernatural dangers were heightened. Yet these planning activities actually encouraged careful consideration of practical factors including weather conditions, seasonal hazards, and social circumstances that affected travel safety through earthly rather than celestial influences. Medieval travelers maintained elaborate protective routines involving blessed amulets, specific prayers, and ritual preparations that were believed to provide supernatural protection against the numerous dangers that threatened individuals who left the safety of their home territories to venture into unknown regions where local protective spirits might not recognize or defend foreign visitors. The tradition of traveling in groups and maintaining collective protective ceremonies during journeys was justified through beliefs about strengthening supernatural defenses through combined spiritual power. Yet these practices actually provided genuine safety benefits through mutual protection, shared resources, and group problem solving that reduced travel risks through practical cooperation rather than mystical intervention. Medieval communication practices incorporated elaborate protocols for sending messages, conducting negotiations, and maintaining relationships across distances that were believed necessary for ensuring accurate transmission while protecting communications from supernatural interference by demons who might corrupt important information or misdirect crucial messages. The practice of blessing written documents and sealing them with protective symbols was intended to prevent demonic tampering with important communications. Yet these authentication methods actually provided genuine security through verification systems and tamper detection that protected against human rather than supernatural interference with correspondence and official documents. Medieval communities developed elaborate diplomatic rituals and ceremonial protocols that combined practical negotiation with spiritual protection, measures designed to ensure successful outcomes, while defending against supernatural manipulation by evil forces that might influence important political and commercial discussions through demonic interference with human judgment and decision-making processes. The tradition of conducting diplomatic meetings during specific lunar phases and astrological conditions was motivated by beliefs about cosmic influences on human judgment and supernatural forces that could manipulate negotiations. Yet these timing restrictions often coincided with practical considerations such as optimal travel conditions, seasonal trade patterns, and agricultural cycles that naturally facilitated successful negotiations through earthly logistics rather than celestial intervention. Medieval merchant practices incorporated elaborate blessing ceremonies for new trading ventures and protective rituals for valuable goods that were believed necessary for ensuring commercial success while defending against supernatural theft, demonic sabotage, and evil eye curses from jealous competitors who might employ spiritual forces to disrupt profitable business relationships and destroy accumulated wealth. The practice of conducting business transactions only during certain days of the week and specific hours was justified through beliefs about divine favor and supernatural protection during blessed times. Yet these scheduling restrictions actually aligned with market cycles, customer availability, and optimal conditions for transportation and storage that improved business outcomes through practical timing rather than mystical intervention. Medieval craftsmen developed elaborate workshop blessing ceremonies and tool consecration rituals that were believed necessary for producing high-quality goods while protecting against supernatural interference from demons who might sabotage important projects or corrupt the spiritual essence of handmade items through evil influence on the creative process and material transformation. The tradition of beginning new projects only during favorable lunar phases and conducting specific prayers over raw materials was intended to invoke divine blessing and ensure supernatural protection for craft production. Yet these practices actually encourage careful planning, quality material selection, and optimal timing that improved craftsmanship through systematic preparation rather than celestial influence. Medieval building practices incorporated elaborate foundation blessing ceremonies and structural protection rituals that were believed necessary for creating stable, safe constructions while defending against supernatural forces that could weaken buildings, cause structural failure, or invite demonic habitation in improperly consecrated structures that lacked appropriate spiritual safeguards. The practice of burying blessed objects beneath building foundations and conducting elaborate consecration ceremonies for new structures was motivated by beliefs about establishing divine protection and preventing supernatural threats. Yet these traditions actually encouraged thorough site preparation, careful material inspection, and systematic construction techniques that improved building quality through practical craftsmanship rather than mystical protection. Medieval communities maintained elaborate fire prevention and safety rituals that combined practical precautions with spiritual protection measures designed to defend against both accidental fires and supernatural arson caused by demons who used flames as weapons against human settlements, and individuals who had offended spiritual forces through improper behavior or inadequate protective measures. The tradition of maintaining blessed water supplies and conducting regular purification ceremonies for firefighting equipment was intended to provide supernatural assistance in combating demonic flames. Yet these practices actually ensured readily available water sources, properly maintained firefighting tools, and coordinated community response systems that reduced fire damage through practical preparation rather than divine intervention. Medieval weather protection practices incorporated elaborate storm prediction rituals and atmospheric blessing ceremonies that were believed necessary for defending communities against supernatural weather demons who controlled rain, wind, and temperature changes according to their malevolent desires or responses to human spiritual condition and proper religious observance. The practice of conducting community-wide weather ceremonies during seasonal transitions was motivated by beliefs about appeasing atmospheric spirits and maintaining divine favor for favorable conditions. Yet these gatherings actually provided opportunities for sharing practical weather observations, coordinating agricultural activities, and preparing collective responses to seasonal challenges through community cooperation rather than supernatural intervention. Medieval animal husbandry practices were governed by elaborate blessing rituals and protective ceremonies that were believed necessary for ensuring healthy livestock, while defending domestic animals against supernatural threats, including shape-shifting demons, evil eye curses, and spiritual possession that could cause disease, behavioral problems, or mysterious death among valuable farm animals. The tradition of conducting seasonal livestock blessing ceremonies and maintaining protective symbols in animal housing areas was intended to provide divine protection and ensure supernatural health for domestic animals. Yet these practices actually encouraged regular health monitoring, proper housing maintenance, and systematic care routines that improved animal welfare through practical management rather than mystical protection. Medieval fishing practices incorporated elaborate water blessing ceremonies and protective rituals that were believed necessary for successful catches while defending against supernatural threats from water demons, river spirits, and lake monsters who controlled fish populations and could either grant abundant catches or curse fishermen with empty nets, according to their spiritual preparation and proper ritual observance. The practice of conducting blessing ceremonies for fishing equipment and timing fishing expeditions according to lunar phases was justified through beliefs about appeasing water spirits and optimizing supernatural conditions for abundant catches. Yet these traditions actually aligned with natural fish behavior patterns, optimal weather conditions, and seasonal feeding cycles that improved fishing success through biological rather than mystical factors. Medieval hunting practices were surrounded by elaborate preparation rituals and spiritual protection ceremonies that were believed necessary for successful hunts while defending against supernatural retaliation from forest spirits, animal guardians, and woodland demons who protected wild game and could curse hunters who failed to show proper respect for spiritual forces governing natural environments. The tradition of conducting pre-hunt purification ceremonies and maintaining specific behavioral restrictions during hunting expeditions was intended to ensure divine favor and prevent supernatural interference with hunting success. Yet these practices actually encouraged careful preparation, systematic tracking techniques, and respectful environmental behavior that improved hunting outcomes through practical skills rather than spiritual intervention. Medieval forest management practices incorporated elaborate tree blessing ceremonies and woodland protection rituals that were believed necessary for maintaining healthy forests while defending against supernatural threats from tree spirits, woodland demons, and forest guardians who controlled timber growth and could either bless or curse human forestry activities according to proper spiritual observance. The practice of conducting seasonal forest ceremonies and maintaining protective boundaries around managed woodlands was motivated by beliefs about appeasing forest spirits and ensuring divine blessing for timber production. Yet these traditions actually encouraged sustainable harvesting practices, systematic forest monitoring, and environmental conservation that promoted forest health through ecological management rather than supernatural protection. Medieval mining practices were governed by elaborate underground blessing ceremonies and protective rituals that were believed necessary for safe extraction, while defending against supernatural threats from earth spirits, underground demons, and mineral guardians who controlled ore deposits and could cause cave-ins, flooding, or mysterious accidents among miners who failed to show proper spiritual respect. And so, as the last candle flickers in our medieval journey, and the monastery bells fade into the gentle silence of night, we've discovered something remarkable about our ancestors, and perhaps about ourselves. These supposedly primitive people, with their strange rituals and mysterious practices, weren't quite as backward as we once believed. They possessed an intuitive wisdom that modern science is only now catching up to, wrapped in the spiritual language that made sense to their world. Tonight we've walked through cobblestone streets, where superstition and science dance together in ways their practitioners never understood, creating healing traditions, protective practices, and life-sustaining customs that genuinely worked through mechanisms far more earthly than they ever imagined. Perhaps there's something humbling in realizing that progress doesn't always move forward in neat straight lines, and that wisdom can emerge from the most unexpected places when we remain open to learning from those who came before us. Sleep well, knowing that sometimes the most profound truths hide in the simplest traditions, and that the gentle rhythms of medieval life contained insights about health, community, and human flourishing that our hurried modern world is still learning to appreciate. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be as peaceful as those medieval sleepers who trusted in lavender and prayers to carry them safely through the night.